Welcome to Glow, the podcast that illuminates your path to personal transformation. I'm Jessie Moss, your guide, author, and intuitive healer, here to help you crack wide open and glow from the inside out. I'm so excited that you're here. You are not alone. Let's walk this path together. Welcoming you into the second episode of the Glow podcast. This episode is about how to surrender the stories. And if you don't know what I mean by that, we will take it step by step and I will break it down as I go along. So when I refer to surrender your story, I'm really speaking to the patterns of behavior that we might find looping around on repeat. Those relationships that we find a different person, but the same thing keeps happening. So it's these similarities, this known behavior that we have. And this episode is going to help you to dig into what's underneath and what may be hidden in these realms so we can know ourselves better. I feel like when we know ourselves really well, it's such a powerful place to be, to have that self-awareness so you can know what you value, you can know what your needs are, and you can move forward with confidence in areas where perhaps not knowing certain stories or why you do certain behaviors could really block you or hold you back from having those things that you really want. So if just for a moment you thought into something that you've been trying really hard to manifest, whether it's holding on to money, saving money, whether it's actually finding that partner that can really meet you in hard places and doesn't run away, whatever it is that you've been calling in lately. And if you have one thing that's been on your radar, on your mind, in your heart, to just feel it for a moment. And while you're feeling that, there will be certain things, if you don't have that thing yet, there are certain things that you will be learning, invited to have experiences around, that will be shaping your experience to doing it differently. So when I say knowing what the stories are that keep us stuck and learning how to surrender those stories, it's important that we backtrack and we start right at the start. So using your own personal example throughout this podcast, always come back to something you've just thought of. Otherwise, I will give examples. So I'm going to kick this off with the mind-body connection and why this is so important. We can't just live from the mind alone and expect to be free of our trauma and to be in a way where we're processing deeply and healing deeply, that we are going to be changing our behaviors permanently. We have to actually drop into the body and experience things on that somatic level to fully process what's happened, because the mind is something that will draw you forward or draw you back. So if you've heard that analogy of too much forward thinking creates anxiety, and too much past kind of dwelling creates that space of more lower energies or frequencies or depression. So if we're stuck in the past or the future, we're not in the present moment. And so what I find dropping into our body does, rather than just living from the mind, is it allows the mind and the body to be connected, which then supports us in finding the present moment, in being able to build on our consciousness. If you lived from the mind alone, this is the aspect I'm talking about with stories. So we have stories that we've experienced and lived through. We have these situations that's happened to us that solidified certain beliefs about ourselves, about other people. Perhaps as a child, we just wanted attention from our parents, but they were really busy working and we were ignored enough times. And you might have been 6 or 7 around the time. This is just an example. and you solidified a belief that you're not worth anyone's time. These things are very subtle and they happen over time. And they usually hide in what's unseen in people. And people usually work their whole lives to learn ways around those coping mechanisms. So then we have a society of people wearing masks and playing a role that is not actually their authentic true self. So how do we start to even know what these things are? So this is where I'm getting to what's in the mind. We start to understand our past through the mind, through the patterns, by analyzing logically what is the pattern behind my relationships, what is my pattern behind money. It'll usually, relationships and money are usually hand in hand in some respects to where we're blocked, where we can't give or receive. So if we were shown at a young age that love is conditional, we have to be a good girl or a good boy or do this, this, and this before we get these things or before we can have love from our parents, then we're going to actually grow up thinking that a lot of other things are conditional to people's time. Whatever it is, we all have different patterns. We all have different conditionings and woundings from a younger age. And if we're not prepared to look at these things, then we can't really dig much deeper. And perhaps that even me talking about this is feeling jarring for some people listening, and they're not ready or willing to go to those places. And maybe it's not time. And that's the other thing. We can't force partners or friends or people to want to go to these places. They have to be at a ready, willing place within themselves. And that's why I started with the first episode around how to make decisions, because stepping up to this inner work at a deeper level and healing at a deeper level where it's all encompassing and it's permanent, not just a temporary fix where we're bypassing something uncomfortable. I'm actually inviting you to be with the uncomfortable things, the sensations, the feelings, the experiences, and to process them in a way where you no longer have to play those roles that aren't serving you, so you can unblock, unstick all this stuff that perhaps is in the way. And so when we think of the mind on its own looping around in patterns, it's automatic. This is why when we're healing at the deeper level, we need to rewire our thoughts and rewire the brain, which does bring the nervous system into play. So now we're talking about the body. So the mind and the body being not just the mind telling the body what's happening and the body having these reactions and experiences from what the mind is thinking and doing. It's a two-way street. So the body is feeling feelings perhaps first, and then it's actually triggering the mind to think certain things, to behave certain ways, to protect itself. So I always like to think that we aren't actually wired to be happy when we're in a society where everyone says, just be happy, just get along. There's a lot of people pleasing and bypassing involved in that. I feel like we're definitely wired to feel comfortable. The nervous system wants to feel comfortable. And the thing is, even if these patterns and behaviors are not serving us at all, as long as it's comfortable, it will be the default. It will be the thing that you go back to because you can navigate that, because that is what's known to you. It is what is familiar. So here we're at this crossroads of looking into the patterns and the things that aren't serving us, maybe the behaviors that we do, self-sabotage, maybe we drink a few too many wines in the week because we're just trying to get to the next thing and avoid how we're feeling. I've been there, I've done that before. And when things are too heavy for us as humans to hold, and when our nervous system shuts down, there is going to be things that we do to help us to get through. And these are the old patterns. These are the old behaviors. And these are the things that if you want deep lasting change, if you want to unblock yourself and get from point A to point B, that you need to look at what is unseen and start to become curious to How is my body feeling? What sensations are going on here when my mind is thinking those things? And so there's patterns. You can write down on a sheet of paper all the things that you know that you do that aren't working for you, whether you get upset and you comfort eat, and then you eat so much that then you feel awful, and then you don't go to the gym. And then there's a spiral of a pattern. There you go, you're looping around again. So you can write down your patterns, get curious to what these patterns are. These are not things that were once in your control. These are things that happen to you over time that is not your fault. And sometimes a lot of people are looking to blame somebody, and parents might be the next ones in line, but they have certain patterns and they have certain conditionings that perhaps they were changing, but it still ended up that it was this way for you. So this is where we talk about healing generational patterns, or things that people have stored in their body, the disease. And if we are in a different environment, if we're choosing different patterns and we're not looping in the same thing, there's a good chance that we're going to break the cycle or break the chain to what has been known for an entire bloodline up until now. And it is up to us to choose that, to have that responsibility or that accountability to that kind of healing for whoever comes after you or whoever's been before you. Think of it now as the pattern versus rewiring your brain. There's two clear choices that you can have here. You can move down that same neural pathway, doing the same thing, or you can create practices of embracing new situations, new challenges. It's always going to be scary, overwhelming, unknown to really step into embracing new situations for ourselves, where we're going to be going outside of that comfort zone. This is where the healing takes place. This is where you're on that edge of expanding your consciousness, your emotional intelligence, your self-awareness, your capacity to really connect deeper to your purpose. Whatever it is that you are actually seeking is not in that known cyclic pattern that you're used to and that is comfortable for you. Otherwise, you would have that thing that you dream about. And another reason why I started all of this off, same as my book Open, I started it off with asking people to decide what they're going to do with this situation and when change presents itself. Because although we might want healing, maybe we're not willing to look deeply, or maybe we don't have the supports in place to go that deep just yet. Why I chose to bring how to make choices from that empowered place for the first episode is because it comes into play throughout everything that I do, all the healing sessions that I do, the book Open that I wrote. There always comes this point in time where we're asked to choose again. When we're invited to choose again and we're in that space of fear, the unknown, what is stored in the unconscious that wants to come up and out for us to work with? Imagine that we're pulling it out, placing it in front of ourselves so we can tangibly work with it. And that's us kind of expanding our consciousness, expanding the way that we know ourselves better, so we can be more aware of these patterns and behaviors. It is not easy to do this work. So by no means am I saying that this is very easy, but I am encouraging anyone who's listened to this, even if you've seen healers before, to just have an open mind here, because sometimes people can only hold space for you at the depth that they've held space for themselves. And so in a world of healing, I do find that there is a lot of the encouraged bypassing of certain parts of yourself, or certain phrases that don't actually serve a deep healing purpose in this society where people are encouraging the people-pleasing, the enabling, and going to straight to source consciousness alone and completely avoiding emotions and what's in the body. And how can we fully heal if we don't acknowledge that we're in this vessel, that we have a brain that has these patterns on repeat, and we have a body that's used to having certain reactions to people, things, thoughts, situations. It's a holistic approach to come at it from a place of allowing your emotions to exist while you're in these processes. An example of an unconscious pattern on repeat that's in the unseen is you're in the dating scene and you're wondering why over and over again that you're not being chosen. People tend to find a reason not to stay around. In this day and age, you get ghosted, cut off. It's about swiping. It's not very personal. It's not a place where people have to show up and really consider that there's a human on the other end. It can feel very rejecting to someone who is constantly not chosen as a child to be on a dating app. And then when you're having these experiences of getting to know people and there's always something in the way, if you're holding that pattern of not feeling good enough to be chosen, or perhaps there's an underlying hidden unconscious patterning of unworthiness or not deserving, then it's going to come through that dating experience, and you're going to gravitate towards people that are going to reinforce that story and reinforce that wounding towards you, so you can see that part of yourself even deeper. A lot of the time it just feels uncomfortable, so people will go to the next thing. People will use alcohol, food. There's lots of different coping mechanisms. We may just get super busy with work and just forget it even happened. So rather than being with what's underneath that rejection of not being chosen, because it may be too painful, you may not have the willingness to grieve about that, and you may shut the door, which then encourages that part of you to stay hidden. This is where the cycle will kick back around and it'll loop again. So it can loop again in a way where you find someone completely different that has multiple different qualities, and you think to yourself, there's no way that this person won't choose me, something like that. And so you get to the point, and then all of a sudden there's rejection, or there's something again, unworthiness comes up, where you will have to grab hold of that thing, whatever it is that's come up, deservingness, worthiness, guilt, shame, whatever it is, whatever that deeper emotion is, and hold it. And so when we actually catch it and hold it, we're being aware of our story at a deeper level. We're understanding that there's perhaps even a younger version of ourselves really coming up for attention. And rather than seeking it externally or seeking other people to choose you and fill that hole or fill that void within you that just needs love or wants to feel worthy, perhaps by finding ways to choose ourselves and be with ourselves and be fully available to who we are, actually can help that part feel more settled. And then that part won't go searching for it in other people. Obviously, also having experiences with people that are choosing you, whether it be friends or a job that you got, there's other ways that perhaps that part of you won't let you see that you are being chosen. And then to allow yourself to be in those experiences fully and feel what that feels like for your body. This can't happen if that part just stays hidden, because it's too much to feel the depth of it. But when we encourage it to come up and out, and we hold it, and we kind of allow that part of ourselves to feel that time has gone on, we reorient it to the present moment. So we now know what the pattern is, we know what the story is, we're feeling that sensation of unworthiness and not being chosen, and how much that hurts in our body. Perhaps there's memories behind that, perhaps there's ages that experience abandonment. There's many things that can go on around that example. And when it all comes to the present moment, it's more of a sense of wholeness in the way of we're experiencing that tangible workings with how we want to expand through this challenge, how we want to expand through this unearthing of knowing ourselves deeper, how we want to really unravel that story so we no longer do it. Most of the time, and from what I see in my healing profession, is people need to get to the edge of really having enough, where enough is enough. I'm done, no more. It's this really deep feeling of it's final and I'll do anything to heal this. That's the point. When we get there, always a new layer to it exposes itself. It is a really unraveling time to feel into surrendering a story, because it may feel to that part that you're pushing it away, but in fact, it's better to be curious and to actually bring that part in and allow that part to be with you through the process. So that part of you may need reassurance that it is good enough, that you are choosing that part and to move forward, in a particular way, in a way where you're choosing deeper healing. So a sense of purpose, I find, can always rise from our shadows, the shadow work, the unconscious, the hidden stuff under the surface. There is always a way to feel into deeper purpose for being on this planet. Through the shadows comes the gifts. So there's always a part of you that has this story. Once you unravel it a little bit, we start to surrender that story and realize I am who I am in this present moment because I get to choose. And a personal story, I remember going to this workshop, something about your unlimited self. And I hadn't yet moved into thriving from that whole domestic violence situation that I was in. I was still struggling. I still had coping mechanisms happening. And I was searching externally through so many avenues. And this lady was talking about something to do with what I'm talking about now, something to do with write down stories that you tell yourself. And I was like, well, I am who I am because of what's happened to me. And I was so in belief of that until she said, no, you're not. And she challenged me to think differently, and I couldn't. And I remember her saying, you are who you are and who you choose to be because of this present moment. And it actually felt like relief through my whole body to know that I didn't have to play a certain role because all these things had happened to me. I got to just be who I was and who I chose to be in that moment. And I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that. But the key point for me in that moment is that I felt it in my body. The right person just said the right thing at the right time. And I came out of my mind and into my body and I felt it. And that mind-body connection brought me to the present moment enough to realize a whole lot of stuff in that moment. A whole trajectory completely changed from that decision of wanting something different, not being able to quite see it yet, and being in that space at the right time. And so I really hope that this episode has felt expansive, informative, compassionate, in a way of understanding all parts of us belong and that it is for the highest good. Knowing what comes from your shadows and the qualities that you have as a human from what you've been through, and not getting rid of these parts, but choosing to keep their strengths with you and choosing to kind of transmute the old patterns, knowing that it brings a deeper sense of purpose. So who are we without that story? That's really scary to that part. So we have to actually feel into, what role do I now play now that I don't do X, Y, and Z, now that I don't just go over my boundaries or become someone else so someone chooses me? How do I stay myself and play a new role? How do I bring that part into understanding with me and work with it through surrendering the story? So the question might come up, who am I without the story? And that's completely normal. I like to always invite people to be curious to, how can I use my story for good? Knowing that the fear will be there. And just because we fear something doesn't mean we don't have to do it. But I feel like we do have to do it in a way where we're acknowledging that we are in a body and we do have a nervous system. And so we can't completely bypass or leap completely to a whole new reality. We have to take micro steps there so our nervous system can expand and contract and work its way with you through the experience. So if you go into a big leap and you expect it all to be different and you have a huge reaction to it because, one, there's a nervous system, there's parts at play, there's things that need to actually integrate and embody a new way forward and to be assigned those new roles so those parts can slowly get used to the change and the shift. Some things, yes, happen super quick, but when we do have choice over our healing and we are communicating with the body and the mind together and we are in the present moment, it's much easier to feel into, what do I need? How does it feel right to implement these things? How do I start letting go of that story in a way where I feel safe, where it's going to be a long-lasting change, where I can stay in recognition of my body, my mind, and the present moment while I'm choosing a new way forward. So anytime that we get to a pattern, the story, a wounding, whatever it is, anytime that you get to that point and you really want to choose again, thinking about surrendering the story, knowing myself well, knowing those parts of myself, tuning into what I need, all of these things that I'm talking about on this episode really help you to zoom out to see a bigger picture, to be impersonal to your story. And sometimes the heavier the story or the bigger the story for us, it is nice to sometimes not have to completely surrender it or let go of it straight away. Because, like I said before, in a society of spiritual bypassing, people are encouraged to just let go, to just surrender, to just be happy. And it actually doesn't work like that. You might be asked 1,000 times to surrender a particular story. Every time you get to that edge, again, it's another layer of that story, perhaps, that you're surrendering. It's not about leaping and getting rid of it. It's about working with it and integrating along the way and embodying that newer version of yourself. I want to thank you for your time. I'm really grateful that people are choosing to do the deeper work, and it not only impacts your life personally, it impacts everyone that you come into contact with. And so the deeper you go, the more you know yourself, the more you can hold others around you, the deeper you can see other people, and the more understanding and less judgment that we can have in the world. Remember to be gentle with yourself as you're unraveling any stories or any patterns. A lot of the time, it is nice to remember it is not your fault, and to have anything that can reassure you in those moments where it gets a little bit challenging, to seek people that have moved from point A to point B in that way, people that have had the experience and that can actually help you through that challenge or that block. It's not something that you have to always do on your own, knowing that it's going to be scary and unknown and unraveling, to choose to heal deeper, to choose to see those parts of yourself. And it's really normal to experience that. And it is really helpful to validate yourself and the experience that you're having along the way as well, and bring a lot of self-compassion in a way that's not bypassing. Self-compassion can come in a way of, this feels really difficult for me right now. I understand that everyone has difficulty in their life, but this for me this is a big one. I'm going to take a bit more rest. I'm going to be a little kinder to myself in the next few days. Whatever it is for you to actually bring these things into practice. You can always work with me one-on-one. You'll find any of my products as more free healing resources on my website, which is jessiemoss.com. You can buy my book Open. It is also on the website. And I've got an online course called Alignment to Awakening. So if you want support through unraveling these stories and through getting to know yourself better, and you're interested in doing it in an energetic way, as well as a grounded way that has meditations and beautiful journaling practices in there as well, check that out online. In the next episode, I'm going to encourage deeper healing again, where I will talk about things that are linked to attunement, more to our bodies and what our bodies store, and the why behind why we might avoid what the body is storing. So please remember to subscribe so you get the next episode. Share the love with anyone that you know that is going through healing. Review, leave me some feedback. I'm so grateful for your time. Remember that you have a choice. You are whole already. You are not alone. And stay curious.